to our community, this Marin community. A few words. As someone who was raised here in Marin County, who spent most of my life here, who isn't sitting in a seat, an elected seat, a seat where I can influence and have more influence in terms of what happens in this county, how we treat each other, laws, regulations, policies, and programs that look out into the community. I also sit here as a resident and homeowner in Marin County who became more aware in a different way, more than ever, several years ago, actually when we bought our home in Sleepy Hollow, when reading the language that accompanied the property that we purchased, the language that was put down on paper on for the property I live on, in the house I live in, just like it is on properties across Marin County, words that basically forebode the ability of any person of color ever to purchase, to live in, to reside in and on the property that I reside in today. Of course, that language on that deed became illegal in the late 60s, but nevertheless, it is a striking legacy, and it's stark in how it influenced the way Marin County was settled, how our neighbors were settled, neighborhoods were settled, and how that influence carries on today. So a few words from the perspective that I have with the various hats I wear and role I play. We're living in incredibly challenging times. Two crises, one a viral pandemic plaguing the world, the other a centuries-old societal sickness, particular to America. Over this past week, the two have collided, their harsh truths resonating throughout every community, including ours. COVID-19 here in Marin and across the nation is hitting hardest those who are most vulnerable, older people, people with underlying medical conditions. It is also disproportionately infecting those who are least able to safely shelter in place, least able to miss a paycheck, least able to avoid putting themselves in harm's way. It is most often affecting people who lack access to adequate health care, healthy housing, nutrition, clean air, green space, good schools, a promising future. Those who are most at risk in our county and country are most often people of color. It seems no coincidence, or rather some horrible aligning of truths, that the last words of George Floyd, "I can't breathe," reflect the most crippling symptom of COVID-19, suffocating from within, the inability to breathe. I can't breathe, a physical reality and cause of death for George Floyd, an apt metaphor for the experience of living in America as a person of color. Poverty, injustice, inequality, the daily stress of being Black, brown, a person of color in a society built by and for white people is suffocating. I am struck, I cannot get the image out of my mind of George Floyd, a Black man, his airway cut off by the knee and weight of a white man, not much different in form or result than a hanging. We have all seen it. In an excruciating, unedited 8-minute long video, we clearly see life being crushed out of George Floyd, as clearly as we can see the sense of power, ownership, and right to dominate in the face and body of Floyd's executioner. People in poverty are disproportionately people of color, here in Marin and throughout the nation. Their lives are informed and formed by the systemic and structural racism that reverberates and permeates in subtle and not so subtle ways, going back decades, centuries. People of color here in Marin, as across America, live in a society that historically and to this day favors white and wealthy. COVID hits people of color the hardest. COVID, which has as its most crippling symptom the inability to breathe. This past week in cities around the country, people from all walks of life, of different race and background, age and income, gathered in protest and solidarity in acknowledgement of the injustice and racism and inequality that persists in this nation. Wearing masks to protect from COVID-19, they cried out, "We can't breathe." People of color haven't been able to breathe deeply, freely for generations. We are living in incredibly challenging times, important times. If there was ever a time that we needed to come together to show respect and compassion for each other, to stand up for what is right, to take on the challenges we face together, disease of the body and disease of our society's soul, it is now. In this time of COVID, we've become more aware than ever of our shared humanity, our shared responsibility to each other, our vulnerability as individuals and a society. The events of the past week, the deaths of 3 Black Americans at the hands of people entrusted to protect, remind us again of our long history of racial inequality, injustice, and the struggle that Black Americans, communities of color, have had to endure. It is this same awareness of our responsibility to each other, our enhanced sense of the importance of connectedness, our awareness of our collective vulnerability that we must draw on as we take on this challenge of race and inequality and injustice in our own community. We are not Minneapolis or Washington, D.C. or Atlanta, but racism, inequality, the long-lived effects of policy and law and power in the hands of one race at the expense of another has roots deep in our community, and it continues to exhibit itself on the deeds of our homes, in the complexion of our neighborhoods, in the trajectory of our children through school and life. Let us use this time of COVID, these tragic events, to take a hard look at our own lives, our neighborhoods, our community. Let us acknowledge the advantages and disadvantages that have come with the color of our skin. Let us talk with family and friends about the role of race in our lives, in our communities. Let us engage each other in conversations about inequality and justice. Let us act in our personal and professional lives with our heightened sense of connectedness and awareness of our responsibility to and for each other, to advance equity, opportunity for all in our community and beyond.